Welcome to the Space Turtle Show, the greatest show in the galaxy. I'm your co-host Joey Garvey, and with me, as always, is the joyful Joshua Toe. How you doing today, Joshua?
Pretty joyful. I just got up like an hour ago in the PM, so that's good. It's always a good sign. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, thank you guys for joining us. On this show, we talk about our favorite scenes and moments, and even try and put in some we don't like as well, if we can think of any.
yeah.
We also break down the films into individual elements, touching on each of them while giving you guys our favorite two. So, speaking of our favorite two, this week we did Rosemary's Baby, a classic film
Yes.
that I'm ashamed that I haven't watched up till now.
And it's the same with me.
Yeah. So, what are your first thoughts of it, Joey?
I liked it a lot more than I expected to, and I honestly expected to like it a lot. It was a slow burn, but I never felt like the pacing was bad. It kept me going, it kept me interested throughout. I liked the acting, the directing, the cinematography, the dialogue was good. It really holds up well for a movie that came out in 1968.
I feel almost the exact same. Was expecting to like it because I've always read from some of my favorite horror films of the like 21st century that they take a lot from Rosemary's Baby and never got around to watch it. So I was like, well, if I love these current horror films, then they're the influences that they take, I'll probably like that movie as well. But also, I'm kind of like iffy on classics because I can appreciate them. It's not that I don't like them or anything like that, but some of the like olden dialogue type stuff like that and the more choppy cinematography and editing can always pull me out of the experience a little bit. So generally I don't love classics as much as other people, and I prefer my modern films. But actually, yeah, I feel the same way that it holds up really, really well because I was enthralled throughout the whole thing, despite sometimes I'm being like, that's some 60s dialogue right there, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's kinda hard when you grow up on such modern films, and then you never really get a chance to see the classics, and then
Mhm,
all of a sudden, because this happened to me too, is all of a sudden you go back and you're like, "This is very, very different." The film genre has gone a long way
mhm,
since, the '60s or the '70s or even the '80s and '90s, so
mhm,
it's kinda cool to mark that timeline.
mhm. Yeah, recently got exposed to like the classic and older films with my film class last year. So
Oh.
that's like the earliest that I got some what is it called? Like experience with really old films like in the German expressionism, I think, and like the 400 blows, Nosferatus or something like that.
Oh,
I
yeah,
forget. Yeah.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, I literally just got into that kind of stuff recently. So it's nice to see a lot of the history that comes with it, but maybe the more educated I get on that kind of stuff, the more I'll appreciate it. But honestly, who knows? Maybe it's just my thing to not like the really old stuff as much as other
Ye
people. But
Yeah, I mean, if you guys have seen our, Hereditary episode that we did as our first episode, it's kind of cool to see the film that really inspired that movie and to see, like, what kind of things were similar and how Rosemary's Baby kinda shaped the films that I love and that I grew up with and that we're watching still today.
off the top of your head, while you were watching, did you find any like films that we love now that has a lot of influences from Rosemary's Baby?
Well, no credit to me. I know Mason brought up the movie Mother with Jennifer Lawrence and Darren Aronofsky, and I could definitely see that as well with like the feminism and religion elements that came
Mhm.
out of them both. And obviously, I just said Hereditary. There's a couple others, I'm sure. I can't really come up with the names at the moment, but those two were the first two that really came to my mind. Did you have any?
Yeah, those 2 were the first 2 that came to my mind too, just 'cause, I actually really like those films, so it's probably some other horror film that took some stuff from Rosemary's Baby, but I'm like, "Oh, I probably didn't like that horror film that much," so it's
Yeah,
not, like, on
yeah.
the forefront of my mind. But with Mother, they even took, like, the poster, of Rosemary's Baby and used it
Yeah.
in Mother. So, like, that's a little bit of a big callback, I guess, a big homage. I thought of that one, Hereditary, of course, and also some of the elements found in Rosemary's Baby also cropped up in American Horror Story season 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I only got through season 1 because it was too slow paced for me and not scary. But, but the whole, like, I guess we'll start talking about some stuff that happens in the film.
Mhm.
The whole, like, someone that's not the husband impregnating the woman. That's what happens in American Horror Story season 1 and this, like,
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
demonic baby. But yeah, what did you think about those kinds of, like, homages, or did you think now that you watched Rosemary's Baby that those things were borrowing, like, heavily, if that was a good or a bad thing?
Well, I mean, in Hereditary's case, I think they borrowed some stuff, but they certainly made it their own now that I've seen the movie. They didn't like steal anything. They were always adding to what
Mm,
came before them. Mother, I've only seen Mother once, and I honestly I don't remember too much, so I don't really have an opinion on whether it added anything or didn't add anything. Knowing that Darren Aronofsky's direction and the cinematography, I'm pretty confident that they added their own stuff, and I know it's a divisive film, so people either liked it or didn't. I mean, I'm pretty confident he added his own stuff, but I don't have a strong opinion about Mother. Did you see anything?
yeah, I think I agree with you with Hereditary. I think more of a tonal type similarity with Hereditary, kind of like that oppressive, everyone is against you type feeling. I think that people are becoming more and more comparing these like tones with films. But in my opinion, I feel like Hereditary is like vastly different than Rosemary's Baby. I mean, they have like the similar tone, but one is about like a family and one isolates like the mother, so I feel like that in and of itself is already creating like a radically different film.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of Mother, though, I did notice a couple actual similarities. I think the first thing I noticed was the type of writing or acting that the two main characters for both films kind of follow suit. The mom with Jennifer Lawrence and I guess what is his name, like him with the
Oh,
um,
Javier Bardem?
yeah, Javier Bardem, and then mirroring Rosemary's Baby with Rosemary and Guy, how Guy kind of, like, comes in and out at, like, really weird times, like, it just and he, like, ditches her for, like, I guess the older couple and stuff like that. It kinda mirrors a little bit about how Javier Bardem, like, kind of just leaves her to, like, go, present himself to people and stuff like that. And the acting with Jennifer Lawrence, I feel like she took a lot of inspiration from Rosemary. I'm not sure if that's like the actual case, but I could see a lot of the things that Rosemary and Rosemary's Baby was doing that really was mirrored by Jennifer Lawrence. So I think Mother has a lot more like physical similarities, although the tone is a little bit different because one is like mainly on religion and the other one is about like motherhood or actually I don't know. Like, what do you think
Yeah.
Rosemary's Baby is about? Honestly, I'm
Well,
confused about that.
I think Rosemary's Baby has a lot of roots in feminism and religion and
Hmm.
motherhood. I think that and Mother are very similar in that way.
Hmm.
I think Mother was a little bit more overt in its religious ties.
Mhm,
Not that that's a bad or a good thing, but it was a little more overt. And Rosemary's Baby spent a lot more time kind of getting involved in like the conspiracy aspect of it, like
mhm,
trying to figure out what's going on, solving the mystery. It was more of a thriller in that way. Whereas
mhm.
in Mother, it was something very objectively scary was going on. Uh, you want to share your first thing that you liked about it a lot?
Yeah, I actually struggled with this a lot, which is generally not the case for me because I like pick out things pretty easily that I like while watching a film. Like I really love the acting, but also like the acting is like a 60s type acting. So like in terms of 60s type acting, it's really good, but in terms of like modern acting, sometimes it's a little on the nose, like that kind of stuff. But I think I decided on my first one and my this is gonna be my favorite one. Usually, the
Uh-huh.
2 are, like, intermingled, but, I think my favorite thing was the directing.
The
Um,
directing. Ooh.
yeah. I think with our new definition of, like, the curator of tone and that stuff,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, I felt like it is a slow burn, so in the beginning, it's not, like, that scary or that tense, but I feel like he entered or injected enough suspicion and enough weird stuff that's going on that kind of is like, "What?" In the first like, even in the first couple minutes of the film, that there's this kind of gnawing at your subconscious, almost like Rosemary feels, throughout, and then later on, it adds more and more, and it almost makes you doubt her for a second until, like, the big reveal, and I think it was just, like, really cohesively well done, and it grew to a climax that was phenomenal, so
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about the directing is how I can think of only 2 scenes that really were trying to be scary in the
mhm.
movie, but you were always on the edge of your seat the whole time because the ideas they were presenting and the suspicion that was going on throughout the film always kept you invested in the story, you know? And I think those are the kind of horror movies that really get to you, you know, where the idea is like you go to sleep and you just start thinking about, well, what's the idea of this? Like the idea of a woman not being able to like control her body and then like the devil being a part of your everyday life and you know those things like that that you can fall asleep with whereas like a jump scare is like it's a shallow scare. It's not really you're not really gonna think about that in 5 minutes, you know, unless it's a
Mhm,
really, really good one, and, you know, there's some directors that can do it well, like James Wan and everything, but
mhm.
these kind of slow burn movies that really push their ideas and try to get you scared by what they're talking about, I think, the directing did a really good job at showing that.
Yeah, I was just looking at the, IMDb page and, like, the user review that pops up as you're, like, just scrolling down is, like it says the title, "An atmosphere like no other." And I think that, like, encapsulated what I felt was my favorite part of the directing. It was just never too much in the early scenes, never too little, and then never, like, too much or too little in the end as well. But what about
Yeah.
you? What's your first, what's your favorite thing?
So, my favorite thing is one performance in particular, and I wanna go with Mia Farrow as Rosemary
Mm.
in the beginning. I think you're a little crazy because I think the acting in this movie, I couldn't even see the 60s at all. She was just maybe one of the best performances I've seen in a long, long time as Rosemary. She just had a sort of, vulnerability with, like, intelligence. It's like she was very cognizant of what was going on, and she did a very good job of displaying all of her emotions and arrange whatever needed to be shown at this particular time, and she felt very realistic to me. I felt like, you know, this could really be going on to her, and it felt authentic, and
With Rosemary, with Mia, I think that is almost an exception in my analysis of the acting. Although I do feel like some of her dialogue is 60s, I do agree with you that, like, her acting, I didn't feel was very 60s. I feel like it holds up, very well in if you were to take that and put it into a modern film. I actually felt like there was a lot of that later influenced, The Shining, main, female character. I forgot her
oh,
name.
yeah, I don't know her name.
Shelley Duvall, who plays Wendy. Maybe it's that kind of like female mothers in horror film type like acting or like or something like that. But yeah, whenever it's like a mother in acting in a horror film, I think a lot of it takes some inspiration from Rosemary, and I found that really interesting to I guess now put the pieces together since we didn't watch this one first. We watched all the other ones first.
Yeah, I feel like if I could have restarted my film journey, I probably would have watched this one right off the bat.
Mhm. Yeah, and I felt like her Mia's eyebrows were just so expressive, and I loved how the like Roman Polanski gave her some moments to just like have shots of her face and
Uh-huh.
just watch her as she like talks. I always was drawn to like her eyes and her eyebrows, and even her body language whenever she got like kind of like in pain or sick or something like that. The makeup
Mhm.
helped a lot because she looked like so bad.
Yeah,
She
she
looked
looked pale and in a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah, that helped a lot too, but also her body language just, like, sold it through. Yeah, it was very believable that she was in a lot of pain, and she had this kind of, like, suppressed pain and suppressed, like, suspicion and stuff like that. I never felt like she was going, like, too far with things. It was like she's, like, an intelligent woman, but things are just starting to, like, crack around the edges because of her situation, and she's, like, trying to logically put it together, but sometimes, it's just Satan in the cults.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she did a really good job anchoring the movie because you never really once believed that she was crazy, you know? You always knew that she was the sane one and
Mhm.
everyone else was just fucking weird.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
you're
she did a
always on
good
her
job
side.
anchoring that because if she went a little more over the top or a little more crazy a little bit earlier in the film, you might be like, well, hey, maybe these guys are right. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed that, like, we had a strong protagonist that we would be able to follow the whole time, and we could see it from her perspective very easily, and I think that has a lot to do with the direction also, but, they're always working in tandem. Everything's ambiguous when it comes to film. It all kinda works
Mhm.
together, you know?
Yeah. We were always on her side, like, even if it was, like 'cause I've heard a lot of things about the film, but I still kinda try to go in putting them all away and not really knowing what the film was gonna be about or how it's gonna
Mhm.
end and stuff like that. So there was a part of me that at the very end, I was like and before she goes and meets everyone in the satanic cult and everything, there was a part of me that's like, "Well, like, what if she just, like the ending, instead of being, like, really dark like that, it just turned out like she was crazy?" And I, like, played with that idea in my head, and I was like, "Well, even if that were the case, I would still be on her side." It'd be like, Why are all these weird things happening?" They need to make some really, really good explanations for everything for me to be like, "Oh, okay, I guess she's crazy." Like, you in that position would be like, "What the heck is going on?" too, you know?
Yeah, like, the smartest person in the world would be like, "What the fuck?" Like, that's just shit that doesn't happen to everyone every day.
Yeah, and
Your
she's
husband doesn't always sell his soul to the devil.
But yeah, I was just gonna say that she's smarter than I am too. Like the whole missing one piece of belonging or something, like, and then noticing that the Hutch was missing his glove that one time. I was like, oh my gosh,
No, I
forgot
mean,
about that.
the fact that she was able to solve that anagram immediately
Oh,
makes her smarter than me, by
true. I
all
forgot
means.
about that.
Yeah, but I could see what you mean with the acting though, with some of the other people. Like, I think the acting of Mia Farrow and, what's his
Guy,
name? John,
John,
yeah, the guy who plays Guy. Those
John.
guys I thought were really good. The older couple were a little bit more cheesy, and I think
Hmm.
that might be where your '60s dialogue you're talking about, possibly.
Hmm. Hmm.
I could see they were a little bit more cheesy than the lead 2 guys and gals.
It's
Um,
kind of funny because the older woman, I forgot her name, Minnie Castevet. She's the one that won the Oscar.
I know, I looked that up and I was like, "That's kinda weird." She was probably my least favorite performance in the movie.
I mean, I didn't hate it. I was just, like, expecting more from it after looking at it. Like, I was like, "Okay, she has to play, like, a bigger role." Like, is she, like, the head of, like, the cult or something like that? But she never ended up having, like, that I wouldn't say big of a role. She does have a big role. It's just that, like, more of, like, a mastermind.
Substantial?
Yeah, or like a antagonist type thing instead of it being like the whole of the group or the couple, the old couple. It would be more like she's like the one more in power, maybe because he was like getting sick, near the end or something like
Yeah.
that. And it would come more of like a head, like Mia versus Ruth, or like Rosemary versus Minnie, instead of like, yeah, she just was like a member of the cult, like
And
everyone else.
and from a writing standpoint, I don't really mind that much, but just, like, from a performer's standpoint, I don't think she accentuated everything, like, she didn't elevate her source material. I thought she did a good job with what she had. So, like, she was a good performance. She just
Yeah, I think I was just trying to like work around in my head, like what is it about like 60s dialogue or 60s acting that I'm like like, I guess, wary about. I do like to like have these kinds of strong opinions, but I don't want it to be like, baseless or just be like, oh, I don't like 60s dialogue or 60s acting. I think one of the biggest things is the tendency to almost like talk over the other person and the reaction time between lines of two people in the dialogue to be like really, really short. I think I see that a little bit in some modern stuff, and I always feel like it might be just my personal opinion, but I always feel like that's like too quick for people to think of a response. Maybe I'm just maybe
Mhm.
I'm just super dumb and super slow. So when I receive a line from another like person, or if I watched lines being received from two actors, I always think it takes like, it takes a little bit of time for you to process what they say and then like give like, your next line. And I love actors that are able to show that like internal process, because as an actor, you have all the lines in front of you. So you don't need time to think about what to say. Well, I mean, besides the memorizing part.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but like you don't need time to process what they're going to say because you already know what they're going to say. And so I think one of the tropes that really puts me off on modern acting is when people deliver their line almost as soon as the other person gave their line. So it's almost like how like in a normal conversation, how did you like process all that information so quickly? And I feel like in this film, sometimes when Rosemary talks to Minnie, Minnie kind of just like actually yeah, there's sometimes some moments where she like does that kind of like really quick delivery. Also, there are also some times where it's just in her character to just like over talk over Rosemary, because Rosemary is
Uh-huh.
pretty timid. So if I had to give some kind of like analysis or in-depth reason, it would be something similar to that. There's also 60s dialogue, so like the writing in general sometimes is like, olden times, but that's I guess not as bad as a criticism, because people just talked different back then and I didn't know how they talked, so I can't really criticize that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we kinda differ on is because I'm a huge fan of witty dialogue. I like fast, witty dialogue. That's why I'm a huge fan of, like, the opening scene of Reservoir Dogs or all of Aaron Sorkin's work,
Mhm.
or, like, I think the dialogue was, something I was considering to be one of my favorite things in this movie because I love the dialogue a lot, and I love how fast and just I enjoyed how fast it moved, you know?
Mhm.
Um, I have seen people that are that fast before, and it's something I wanna be able to do someday, so I think it's partially that, just being able to, like, be fast and be witty and be able to talk like that. So that's just for me personally, but I can understand, there's a lot of actors that, like, will chew on, like, a certain word or anything. I think that's kind of a trend that's coming back right now, though, is like the fast, witty dialogue.
I mean, Aaron Sorkin is like one of my favorite screenwriters like of all time, and I don't know. I think I view it a little bit differently in his films or like the ones he writes, whereas these like older films, perhaps it's just like a personal preference type thing. But I feel like with his films, like let's take The Social Network, Jesse's character, Mark Zuckerberg,
Yeah.
to think about that for a second. He's like actually like one of the most like a very intelligent character and a very intelligent person. And so it's a little bit easier for me to accept him like being able to outwit and like outtalk everyone else. Whereas
Mhm.
like with an old couple being able to do that, it's a little bit harder for me to enjoy, especially if it's more not like one-sided type stuff or like equal sided or something like that. Like with Mark Zuckerberg or Jesse Eisenberg, it's so fun to watch him like dominate the other speaker that's in the scene with his like quick and witty like lines. Whereas this is just like a regular day where they're like really quick and I don't know. That's a little bit about
Yeah, no, I could see that because Aaron Sorkin has always almost entirely only written intelligent, like high class people,
mhm.
whether it be Molly's Game or The West Wing, or so I can understand that. But I guess where I kind of bought in on that is just where they were living and, what kind of apartment they had. Like they seemed like some pretty powerful people.
That's true.
Those old guys.
Mhm.
Um, and apparently they were.
Yeah, I mean, it is my first watch, so I might feel differently because I flip-flop all the time. So that's why it sucks to yeah, start talking, and forming some concrete, opinions after the first watch, but, everyone's gotta do it, so
Nah, dude, it all flows. It's whatever. I'm gonna change my mind in 30 seconds.
Alright, well, do you have, like, a second favorite thing?
I'm stuck between a couple actually. Probably not gonna say dialogue because we already just talked about that. I guess I would go with the cinematography.
Oof, I guess. Alright, yeah, yeah, mhm.
Did you
What
have cinematography?
I was bouncing between cinematography and writing, and then you're like, "Oh, we talked about dialogue," and I'm like, "Okay, I guess should I still talk about writing or should I talk about
No, no, no,
cinematography?"
no,
And then you go
no, that's my
cinematography. I'm
bad.
like, "Rip, I'm in a corner now."
No, no, I'm sorry.
No,
Uh,
it's all good.
I'd like to talk more about the writing. I actually have a couple. Yeah, I've got some opinions on the writing,
Yeah, but
but
let's take the cinematography first.
yeah.
You're
So
on.
the cinematography I thought was pretty spectacular. It held a lot of steady cam. It felt really modern
Mhm,
for a movie that came out at that time. A lot of movies at that time they didn't have that timeless quality. The kind of way that you shoot like Jaws or Close Encounters or Star Wars.
mhm,
Those movies that they're shot timelessly. No, 12 Angry Men is another example where it's an old film, but the way it's shot, it's almost timeless. And I think this
mhm.
equates to one of those kind of movies.
I think one of my favorite things about the cinematography is the way it like built suspense. If I had to pick like two of my favorite shots, it would be like number one, I guess off the top of my head, is the one where she's like hiding from him near the end when he comes back to get ice or something and she discovers the like doorway to the other apartment and then she like has the knife and she's like hiding next to the baby carriage, I guess, something like that.
Yeah, and then she
um
stops
yeah,
the baby carriage.
yeah, from shaking, and I don't know why, but that just like the scene was like slightly tense, but it wasn't like the tensest scene I've ever seen. And then once she did that, it just like brought like the intensity up for me. I don't know, what did you think about that?
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think one of the best parts of the cinematography is how it opens up the whole room and it kind of lets you see everything. So you can see Rosemary standing in the side, and then so far away from the shot, you can also see her husband, going to the fridge and grabbing that ice.
Hmm.
Um, but even before that, it can get so close and personal, but just following the knife stopping the baby carriage. Those kind of things I like how it kind of switches between those two. It can get really close with you and then it would open up so fast, which yeah, it just seems like a mastery of, what the director's looking for in the scene.
Yeah, I think one of the scenes that you guys really liked, or at least when we were watching as well, that kind of highlights that aspect was the one where she like locked herself in and then she went to the bedroom and you could just see people walk past in the background. I was like,
Yeah.
yo, I did not think I didn't even know how they got in. Like I think you guys were talking about it, but I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah, no, that was cool. I mean, they were talking about how they had the dresser at the very beginning while they were looking at the apartment. Like, "Oh, why is this dresser here? Let's just,
Uh,
move that. Oh, there's shelves here." And it's like,
uh,
"Oh, it's a secret message. They know
uh,
a way to get in."
big brain.
Yeah.
I did
And
not pick up on
and I
that
was
until
like,
the
"Oh,
end.
shit, dude, she thinks she's safe, but she's not. She's not."
Like, walking
Oh, that was so
like, in the
funny,
back.
though. Like, the film didn't lose its sense of humor. It had some cheese in a little parts where I really appreciated it, like that fucking goofy walking, and they're just, like, on their tiptoes.
Honestly, sometimes that's even scarier. It just reminds me of, like, It Chapter 2 that, in the trailer I haven't seen, but in the trailer when the old lady
Oh,
walks in the
yeah.
background. Wow.
Yeah, just some of that goofy stuff.
Yeah, but I think my second, favorite thing about the cinematography is, like, the way it puts us into her mindset. I think it really did take a it was either, like, a wide shot of, like, a lot of information or almost like putting us in Rosemary's shoes, like, in her perspective. I think the thing that most displayed that was when she went to Doctor Hill, I think, or what's his
Yeah,
name?
yeah, Dr.
Doctor
Hill.
Hill, and she's talking to him, explaining everything to him, and the camera's just, like, slightly below, like, almost, like, knee level of him, and it, like, looks upward, and even though he's, like, acting pretty well, and pretty trustworthy in that scenario. Like, there's so much of you that wants to trust him, and you're like, "Please, like, Rosemary's gone to the right person now, she's gonna get help," and that kinda stuff, that kind of hope. But there's also in that camera angle, like, just an underlying suspicion. It almost, like, felt like what Rosemary felt. Like, she wants to trust him so much, and she thinks she's gotten away and found someone that she's trusted and everything like that. But there's also, like, a little bit of distrust in her that gets gets
Yeah, just
validated later on,
yeah.
sadly.
Well, I mean, if you get bamboozled like that so many times, you're eventually just gonna be suspicious of everything, which
Mhm,
totally makes sense.
mhm.
Another shot I like a lot is when she's in the phone booth and it sticks on her, and you
Uh-huh,
can kinda see the background, and
uh-huh.
then right in the, like, the middle of the call with Doctor Hill, you just see a man standing at the phone booth
True,
right
yeah.
behind her with his back to her. That could be blocking also, but it was one of my favorite moments in the movie because he was just standing there, and we don't know as an audience if he's a guy or not, and the
Mhm,
film never tells us if he is. I assume that he, was listening in on her, but it's not like the film told us anything at all, and, the plot doesn't revolve around whether he was someone or not because I think her mention of Saperstein was really what got her in trouble,
mhm.
but,
Yeah, with that scene, at first I thought it was Saperstein. I was like, "Did he come out? Like, is he, like, chasing
Oh.
her down or something like that?" So it went like the tension went up. But then I think this film has such good, like, rewatchability. Because for example, in contrast, Hereditary, which also has good rewatchability, but, I feel like at the end, you start to feel like that oppressive, like, everyone is against them, like, Joan or Joanne or whatever her name was,
Yeah.
turned out like you were kind of suspicious of her, but she turned out to be like super in on everything, and like everyone is just like plotting against them, and the pieces just fit so nicely together. There's that is one side of the coin, and then you have Rosemary's Baby, where in this first watch, I was like, okay, well, like there's a lot of stuff that's like whack around her, so it totally makes sense for her to be suspicious, but it doesn't feel like every little thing that happened was part of a plan. Like some of the big aspects of what happened, of course, but not like every little thing. But now that you mentioned that, I feel like if I went and watched it again, like that guy being there, at first my thought was like, is that Saperstein? And then he turned around and it wasn't Saperstein. So I was like, okay, I guess it's just the ambiguity or the uncertainty that is increasing the tension of the scene. But
Mhm.
with more information, it seems like, oh, well, now maybe that person is part of the cult, but he isn't Saperstein, but he's still part of the cult. So now I kind of want to
Yeah.
rewatch it back and see if I can find that guy that stood outside her phone booth in the last scenes where like
Oh, that's
where
a good
all of
idea.
them are, yeah, where all of them have gathered to for her baby and stuff like that. So it's like that underlying everything is working against her and everything is part of a puzzle piece for her like demise, I guess. Whereas like Hereditary, it's like a little bit more in the limelight, where the camera like stops on the pole with the emblem of Payman. And I think that's really interesting and it'll be a lot of fun to rewatch it sometime.
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting about the cult is they were not like an insurmountable obstacle. I mean, it was clearly very difficult for Rosemary to get out of her situation, but
Hmm.
you could see that they were changing and flowing with whatever Rosemary was thinking, and they
Hmm.
had to be you could see like Guy thinking on the spot and trying to figure out how best to manipulate her
Yeah.
for this particular scene, or the old woman or the old man, and I forgot their names. Like when she had to go to Dr. Hill, when she wanted to see Hutch, and all of those things, you could see like the actors in their brains, their heads were moving and they're like, "Okay, how do I move from here?" Kinda like a
Mhm.
chess match, you know? But
Yeah.
a chess match that Rosemary didn't even know she was a part of.
Mhm.
So really, they cheated.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I totally agree with that. It was like she had allies. Yeah, I actually really like that analogy, like a game of chess where you watch both sides make moves and interact with each other, and like, adapt on the spot. Whereas Hereditary was just like dominating from the very beginning, like as soon
Yeah,
as step foot into like the arena or something like that, they were like done. Like they didn't know what the heck was going on. Yeah,
yeah,
but
it's
I
like you're 5 years old and you're playing basketball against LeBron James.
yeah.
That's Hereditary. You
Uh-huh.
lose.
Yeah, but yeah, that struggle really, I think, is one of the things that pulled me apart from like Hereditary versus like this film and the comparisons they make. But what was it about the writing that you wanted to mention? Or
Well,
was there anything in particular?
I think you should bring up what you like about writing first, because I actually have a couple problems with the writing, but I wanna see your opinion on it based on what you say about the writing.
I honestly, the more we talked about it, I think it was better explained in your like chess analogy. I don't know. I kind of just liked the way it never felt like cheating in any of the scenarios, or any of the kind of traps that she got into, and got out of, or vice versa type thing. When she has the pain and she gets like really, really distrusting of everyone, and everything like that, and she wants to see Dr. Hill, and then the pain stops, and then she kind of like goes back to drinking the I guess milk type thing,
Uh-huh.
and everything. I felt like that might have been the worst part, where it's like, okay, what? You're just gonna turn around and redo everything that you wanted to get rid of before because it was hurting and now it's not hurting.
Yeah,
Um,
and you couldn't see the coincidence where you haven't been drinking the 3 days and now your pain is gone? Like,
yeah, I
if
think
anything, that's very signifying that you should stop.
uh-huh. Yeah, I think that's the worst of it, but other than that, it always felt like she wasn't, like the places she got herself into, or when she tried to get herself out, it wasn't like illogical for her to get to those places,
Mhm.
and it flowed really well. And it's very believable to get from the first point where she's like happy, and then the last point where she's like, I don't know, happy. I don't know.
I don't know, the ending's very ambiguous, and I liked it a lot, where
Mhm.
she's like, "Well, it is my child. He may
That's
be
so
Satan,
dark.
but at least he's my kid."
That's so dark. That is honestly, it's probably the darkest film that I've seen, I think. Maybe horror film that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dark ending. It's a dark ending, like, the ideas that come from rocking the cradle and raising assuming she raises the devil's son, um
If you watched Good Omens, it's about like
Uh-huh.
raising the son of Satan, and like the whole thing about whether nature or nurture makes you like bad. Yeah, I just kind of thought of that whenever I saw her contemplating raising him.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it'd be very interesting, you just you don't know,
I
you
think
know?
yeah, but I think the themes is what like gets me with the darkness of the film, because it's actually quite brightly lit and stuff like that. There's not really many color palettes in the film that are really dark, even in the climaxes. Even when she's like getting like attacked by everyone. I think the only dark moment that I can think of off the top of my head is when she gets like raped and she has a whole dream sequence.
Uh-huh.
Like other than that, even when she gets attacked later on and like a sedative given to her and stuff like that, it's brightly lit and like there's a lamp on in the scene and everything like that. But just my first watch on this Rosemary's Baby, it's like yeah, there's themes of motherhood and feminism and that kind of stuff, but her ambiguity at the end just kind of comes out of left field, and I think that created a lot darker of a film for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the funny I was also gonna bring up, like, when she got raped by the devil, that was the only scene I thought that had real scary imagery, and it relied on, like, scary images and confusion, and the rest of the movie really relied on thematic elements, and it's kind of interesting that you bring up the lighting because it just makes me think of the other Ari Aster movie, Midsummer. You think
Yeah.
he likes Rosemary's Baby? I think
A
so.
lot, yes. But I like it a lot too, so you know what?
Yeah,
That's
it's
fine.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but what part of the writing did you not like so much then?
There's a couple things. So, I don't know if it's this movie that started this trend or not, which is a reason why I'm hesitant to criticize it for this. There are some story elements in this that I knew were very, very predictable. Um,
Okay,
and I have a feeling it's because I've seen a lot of movies that have tried to copy this movie. But
yeah.
but whether it be from like Hutch calling her being like, "Meet me tomorrow at 11," and then you're like, "Well, we know for a fact he's gonna die. There's no other option. He's gonna die." And then what do you know? He dies. You
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah,
stuff
okay.
like that where it's like I know exactly what's going to happen, just because I've seen it in so many other movies. But I don't know if that's a plot point that this movie took from movies before it, or if this was the one that started the trend of that. But either way, I knew for sure he was gonna die, so I was able to predict it easily.
Yeah, I think for me, I can notice those types of things, but it's like half and half. One half of me is like in the moment of the film, and I'm just like I kind of almost like cast away any type of influence from other films. Also, I haven't watched as many films though. But I can be like, okay, yeah, I think that he's gonna die, but it would be so interesting if he didn't die, and then how would the rest of the film play out? Like, I'm just constantly like looking at so many like forks in the road, so I didn't feel as bad about that kind of predictability. But also on the other 50% is that even though some of the events happened that were very predictable, it didn't have like zero impact on the film and on the character of Rosemary, you know? Like he Hutch was gonna die. We were like, oh yeah, he's gonna die. He knows too much,
Yeah.
obviously. But there's two things. First, he doesn't show up and he gets ill, but she doesn't just go back and she's like, oh man, he got ill. She's like, "This something doesn't make sense," like, you know, like, she learns from that, and it wasn't just, like, a throwaway thing, which I see sometimes happen in other films. It's like, "Oh, that person's gonna die, they know too much." The person goes to meet them, they don't show up, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I guess that's just bad luck or something," I don't
Yeah.
know. And then the second thing is when he woke up, he gave her clues, like, it wasn't just, like he wasn't just a character to just learn too much and then die. He actually, like, push the plot forward. Yeah, or in the beginning of his knowledge that he learned and then getting put in a coma, and then at the very end when he finally dies, he also like pushes the film forward. So, yeah, I can understand that like predictability, but I think there's some stuff that Rosemary's Baby does that kept me from pointing that out or like isolating that little predictability as like a criticism.
No, I could see that because a lot of movies, they just die and they're like, "Oh, whoa, well, he died. Nothing to see here. He just died of natural causes."
Mhm.
Whereas Rosemary was written very intelligently, and she's like, "Well, clearly something's up."
Mhm.
And I mean, she even brings up Hutch at the end of the movie to Doctor Hill. And so
Coincidence? I
yeah,
think not.
it all goes full circle. Yeah, I mean, I still have, like, a bit of I mean, it's just that it was so clear to me that I
Mhm.
was just able to see it.
Yeah, I
Um,
can understand that.
I'm not sure. I mean, the execution around it was really, really good, so it's not like it was a big criticism. This might hit my top 5 horror movies. So, I mean, I very much love it. It's just
Mhm.
if I'm bringing up one thing, that was pretty much my only negative thing. Spoiler alert, I have no other negative.
Yeah.
I was thinking of something, you gotta come up with something. No
Mhm.
movie's perfect.
I'm worse at that than you are. I'm like, "Nope, this movie's perfect." But yeah, I think my well, I think we already mentioned my, like, one, criticism was just, like, the
Yeah.
yeah, the little, dialogue type stuff, and a little bit of acting. But, you know, I don't know, like, both of them perhaps might just be, like, this detachment from, like, the times type stuff, you know? Perhaps it's
Yeah.
the first film that did those types of tropes that we now find commonplace, and then perhaps, like, if I would just lived in the 1960s, then I would, like, be more open to that type of dialogue, you know?
Yeah, I think it would have hit me better if I had watched it in 1968. Unfortunately, I was not even remotely alive then.
Yeah, I think
Um,
actually it's my ah, yeah, I kind of wanna say it's my favorite classic horror film that I've seen, but I've only seen it once, and I've only seen the other one like, in terms of you if you think of, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of, like, 3, horror films that are the most influential from the past, um or at least in the '60s type or in the '60s to '80s type thing. Of course, like, Nosferatu's and, like, that kinda stuff is, like, really influential as well. But that's just, like, way far.
yeah, we
Um
we don't know enough about that. Hopefully, at some point, we'll get to check them out on our film journey, 'cause
Yeah.
that's one of the things I enjoy a lot about the podcast is, watching some stuff I would have never seen before.
But, yeah, I don't know, hot take or not, but as I feel currently, which might change in, like, 2 minutes,
Mhm.
but I think out of the big 3, like, The Exorcist, The Shining, and Rosemary's Baby, actually, as a first watch, I like Rosemary's Baby the best out of the 3.
I am about to rage because you forgot the most influential horror movie ever, which would be Jaws.
Jaws.
Is it Jaws is poss
Thriller? Meh.
possibly the most influential movie ever made.
Yeah, but do I classify as a h I don't know, it might be just me my personal opinion on that. I feel like it'd be more like a thriller, would it not?
Well, I guess we'll just agree to disagree, and I'll try not to punch you.
Talking about
But
Jaws is the most, it's the most
but
heated conversation we've had.
I don't know. I love The Shining, and I have not seen The Exorcist. Don't tell anyone, though, even though
Oof,
we're about to
oof,
put this on YouTube.
blasphemy.
It's so blasphemous. It's so blasphemous, and I watched 10 minutes of it once, but then I was like, "I gotta do homework." I don't know, between that and The Shining, it's very interesting.
Honestly, all 3 of them are, like, so close, like, if I had to sit down and think about their influence on future movies, it would be a really, really big debate, but if I had to just think about, like, personal opinion and my personal preference on film, then I could be a little bit more sure on saying that I enjoyed Rosemary's Baby the most,
Mhm.
babies. But that's yeah, like I said, that's just, like, my type of beat and theme type film. So, you know, it's a little less of a hot take than if we're talking about most influential film, and then I'd be like Rosemary's Baby, then you know that's a little bit more of a hot take,
Well, I don't know how hot of a take that is. It's a very influential movie.
but The
I would
Shining,
The Shining is probably the least influential in my opinion out of those
Exorcist.
3. The Exorcist, I think, is the most, from what I've heard. It's not like I've seen it.
I think maybe we should talk about what do you think the themes are? I mean, besides
Sure,
or like what
sure,
do you think the ending meant, or like
um
what's your take on that? And then I have like one more side note thing to say, and then other than that, I'm good too.
yeah, the themes of the movie I thought were really, really interesting because they came with the timing of the movie. Margaret Sanger created birth control in about the 40s, but it didn't have a lot of, staying power until about the 60s. And it was a really big issue in feminism. And and I think that had a lot to do with like the themes of this movie and like like the ecofeminism aspect, like the controlling of women's bodies. It had a lot to say about how birth control um and all of that stuff was affecting women at the time. And I got a lot of those themes because with the liberal revolutions of like the 60s and 70s, it just seemed to fit with the themes of what was going on around the time, which I thought was a really smart kind of commentary on society at that moment. which might be my favorite thing about the writing, actually. Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that feminism theme going on throughout the film, and I can kind of put that in its time frame, with the whole, like just in general for females with me. I'm not that great with history, so I was like, "What? I didn't know when, like, birth control then? What? I didn't know." But, I can kind of tell, like, the big main ideas about, like, feminism and in that time period, like, the '60s, I'm like, "Okay." Any more detail than that, I'm a little bit more like, "Okay, I guess, yeah, I can see that if someone tells me." I'm just
Right.
curious about, like, the ending type theme or, like, in, like you can continue talking about, like, historical, themes and that kinda stuff and commentary. That's just not, like, the thing that I can easily pick out. So that'd be great if you, like, well, shined a light on that.
Well,
But
that's all I got, really. That
but I was thinking more like as a standalone film, like, what does it talk about at the end? I don't know. There might not be an answer because I am really stumbling to find an answer right now. Just that type of, like, raising Satan as just, like, a film and as a moral theme and not really as, like, a social or, like 'cause society changes all the time, so but, morals, I don't feel like they, like, shift too often, so or at all. I don't know, haven't decided on that, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to think about the morality between whether you would raise Satan or not if he was your son.
I honestly just struggle to, like, put myself like, she's, like, a great protagonist, and I put, myself in her shoes and in her mind, and everything throughout the whole film, but even if I were to hop on her train and be like, "Okay, there's an ambiguity on whether I raise, Satan or not," like, even if I try to put myself in that position, I still can't understand her progression as a character in that scene. Like, she went from, like, just, like, freaking out and, being, like, thrown aback by looking at her son and then, like, spitting on her husband's face to, like, being like, "Maybe."
Well, I mean, she certainly had an initial shock, you know, and I'm sure she still hates her husband because her husband is very clearly a bad person. I mean, when you literally sell your soul to the devil for success, well, you're not a good person. You deserve to be spit on. So I don't see a contradiction between that and wanting to raise her son because at that moment in time, the baby's innocent. Like the baby's done nothing wrong. It's just a baby. It may
Mhm.
be a horribly disfigured baby from Satan, and the connotations around the baby may be poor. It feels like she'd take it like as if it were like a bastard child, as something that like most of society doesn't want, except for like this cultish thing. But
Mhm,
she's coming from like the outer society, and she's like,
mhm,
well, this is something nobody wanted, nobody asked for, but it's important for me to take care of it and to see it through.
mhm.
Which, in kind of a weird way, is kind of a loving message. It's like, no matter the circumstances, I should be taking care of you. It's lovely in a very dark way, a beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy, but beautiful, I think, nonetheless.
Yeah, I think taking what you're saying, I almost get this theme of, like, the debate between nature versus nurture again, and it's also influenced by me watching, like, Good Omens and that whole, like, process being played out. But yeah, disfigured and Satan's child and everything, that's, like, one thing, but perhaps, like, being more, like, religious than most of you guys, it's a little bit harder for me to be like, "Okay, yeah, maybe I'll give him a chance." But, I don't know, she also talked about being raised Catholic in the film, which I don't really know if that's influential in her decision in the end, but after your explanation, I can see a little bit more about that mentality at the end being like, well, maybe she believes more in nurture than in nature. And she's like, that's her mindset in like giving, it's also ambiguous which direction she chooses. But if she chooses to raise him, then maybe she believes more in nurture than in nature. And that's like a little bit of a wholesome
Yeah,
wholesome theme.
I mean, I think something you don't know about me actually is that I'm a bit of a Satanist myself.
Why do you have to word it like that?
No, I'm just kidding. But, yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I can see, like, the symbolism, like, I mean, it's Satan. It's supposed to be the embodiment of evil. So based on that, it's like, well, obviously this child shouldn't exist. But I think what Rosemary's Baby's kind of trying to do is it's maybe making an argument against like binary good and evil. And it's like it's something in the middle. It can be something a little bit different. That's kind of the message I got from it myself. But I don't know. What did you think about it?
I think I think it would be really, really funny if we're like trying to find something more in the middle grounds of the themes of the film, and then Roman Polanski's or like maybe the writer of the novel as well might just be like, yeah, you know what, she just succumbed, and you're just gonna raise this to take over the world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do know there's a lot of theory videos about this ending, though. Like, everyone talks about this ending all the time.
Wow,
It's
I
like
haven't heard.
it's a hot debate topic in the film community, or at least people analyze it and talk to Roman Polanski about it before he
Oh.
was like a rapist and all.
Well,
Now
that's
people
interesting.
talk about the rape a little more.
Rip. But yeah, I guess it'll be fun to research that. But going into the film totally blank slated, it was a very impactful ending. Hmm.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's an ending I was thinking about all day before we shot the podcast. If you guys liked what you heard here, you can subscribe and give us a like. We always appreciate your company to the optimistically 8 people who listen,
Hey.
which is 8 times as many as I expected. So that's awesome. So the challenge still exists. I will Venmo you $10 if you comment first and make it to the end of this video for free. You just have to comment. You can comment, "Fuck you, give me $10," and I'll be like, "Alright, glad you
Joey's
listened."
Joey's just rolling in money right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure, sure. Um,
But
um,
yeah, what's next week's episode on? You want to give them that?
Next week's episode is gonna be our Halloween special, our end of Spooktober, our very glorious ending. It's going to be on The Shining. Uh
Ooh.
So we've both seen The Shining. We both know we love The Shining. I assume we've both seen it multiple times. How many times have you seen The Shining?
I'd say about not that many actually, like 2, maybe 3 times.
Okay, that's about where I'm at too. I think I've
Oh,
seen it maybe
okay.
3 times. But 3 times is plenty. Um, and we're gonna
No.
have a fun time quoting it, giving our best Jack Nicholson impersonations,
Oh.
talking about fun facts and trivia. So if you enjoy that, I hope you come join us at our next stop on our intergalactic adventure.
I think we might come out with a bonus episode at the same time next week.
Oh yeah, you want to explain that one?
We're thinking about watching The Lighthouse as soon as it comes out. I've heard like one thing saying it was similar to The Shining, and so I think that's great that we're doing The Shining and doing this film, giving our takes on whether it's similar to The Shining, what we feel on it. And Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are some of my favorite actors. So
Yeah, and it's gonna be an exciting week next week. I'm pretty excited for podcast. See you later, YouTube. Bye.
bye.
What if Satan's just a cool guy?